Today's episode of Passionate Talk is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audio download and 30-day free trial at books.passionatetalk.com. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Get your 30-day free trial and free audiobook at books.passionatetalk.com. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Passionate Talk. I am your host, Gary Karp, and this is episode 18. Chai, to life, l'chaim. This episode is all about life and love as we continue our conversation with Harold Becker. Today we're going to be talking about the aspects of love. We're going to touch a little bit more on the question of, do you love yourself enough to follow your dreams and passions? And that is an important question that Harold keeps telling us to ask ourselves. We're going to talk about the benefits of pursuing love and money's role in unconditional love. So many people, as they pursue the spiritual path, the unconditional path, have so many blocks about money. And Harold is going to touch upon, and we're going to talk about the role that money does play in unconditional love and spirituality. We're also going to talk about accepting yourself and embracing who you are when it comes to unconditional love, and the changes that will take place when you do accept yourself unconditionally. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of self-dialogue and also the unrealistic expectations about spirituality and unconditional love that may keep people from pursuing it or even realizing that they're already there. So right now, I want you to sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, make yourself some tea, and get ready to enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Harry. Do you love yourself enough to follow your dreams and passions, even when you don't know where they'll lead? Yep. And that's a journey that I'm currently on right now. This podcast is a large measure of that journey. I have no idea where it's going to take me. I have no idea what's going to turn out personally or financially or anything else, but it's something that I finally decided I have to do. And that's a question that at every decision you make, you should ask yourself, do I love myself enough to pursue my passions? And for the many of us, we get caught up in making a living instead of designing a life.
Yes.
It's always been my understanding, and really experientially I know this, is that when we make that decision and we fully commit to ourselves, to our intention, to live by our higher selves, once we commit to that, the universe has a way of saying, okay, you're serious, here we go. And it puts these signposts in front of you, and it puts these opportunities in front of you to help you achieve what you want to do. Now, there's a whole psychological reason behind how that works, because the brain will focus on exactly what you tell it to focus. The brain is a deletion creature. So whatever you're focusing on at the time, clearly and with intention, is what your brain is going to be focusing on. So everything else it eliminates.
And what happens as a result, to take your analogy even further, is when we do open up to infinite possibilities, and we do open up to the unknown, and we do take even those most fundamental baby steps. And, in your pathway, my pathway, similar, we took rather dramatic, huge quantum leaps from where we were. That isn't necessarily the way it has to be for everybody else. I mean, there are lots of incremental choices that people can make.
And really, folks, I would suggest the incremental
yes,
levels. You don't have to jump off the metaphysical cliff. Baby steps. It works as well.
Yes, and to that forward progress, one of the things that when I made this dramatic shift and literally chose to walk away from everything I knew and step into something that I had no clue of, things started to happen that I never could have ever imagined. I mean, again, looking back of what has happened, there were no prior to this time, I never thought I would write a book, much less 5. I never thought I would be on TV. I never thought I'd do radio. I mean, none of the things that I started to experience by taking these steps were even in my dreamscape, in my imagination. They weren't part of my reality. And yet when I made this shift and I started to unfold the path and I started to assess together what I had as new skills and skills that were insights and understandings that weren't necessarily out there, and said, well, this is something that sings to my heart, and this is something that I have insight on and I think is beneficial. And then one thing leads to another, and you start finding, very talents that we never knew we had. I mean, I never saw myself as a writer, and to this day, I don't actually claim to be an author or a writer in those traditional label senses. I actually am fascinated as to how good a writer I've become, and then doing things like, spontaneously being on camera or doing a full show with zero experience prior to that. To be able to step into opportunities that would perhaps scare the bejesus out of most people, or do things that would be fundamentally so potentially unfathomable and, shall we just say, humanly scary, and yet finding that each time I stepped into it, it actually came quite easy. And the more I did it, the easier it became. And these were things that I never dreamed of. This wasn't even on the radar. And so there is that part of the dramatic shift for those that do want to take a dramatic shift. It can take you to some very beautiful, fascinating places.
Well, it's very much what Joseph Campbell said. Follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where there are only walls.
Yes.
And if you follow your bliss, and in this case, I'm going to use the word bliss, which is synonymous with passion, which is synonymous with unconditional love for yourself. For me, they're all the same thing. We're just talking semantics. Once you do that, then yes, you see incredible things happen where they once weren't going to be. And as far as things that you find is scary, if you find something scary, I remember I was at a Tony Robbins seminar in my 20s, and one of the things he said is, if you find something scary, then by all means, you've got to do it. Mm-hmm. Not only from the fact of getting over your fear, but from the fact of it's going to stretch you as a person. We have to move beyond our comfort zones and do something that may be uncomfortable, because that's where the magic lies. That's where creation happens, outside of our comfort zone. So whatever it is that you want to do, go ahead and do it, because you will be conditioning yourself to learn to love adventure and learn to love those risks, whether they're big or they're small, and you will increase the passion and the enjoyment in your life by doing this.
I'm looking backwards in that time period, and I lived with a certain moderate amount of passion. I had a certain passion to get my master's degree. I had a certain passion to work my way up with career and do things that were at least interesting to me. And yet I could say now, to have the two realities, almost two completely different types of lifetimes side by side, the pathway I stepped on to by pursuing love, having first and foremost love for myself, I found a passion for myself that is so unbelievably larger than what I had been doing. So I can look back and say the passion that I thought I had was incredibly mediocre in comparison to the passion of living my truth, living my heart, living my dreams, literally creating each day with the anticipation of, I have no idea what the day will bring me. Isn't this going to be interesting?
Now, I also want to bring up something along that line. Is there are plenty of people out there who live with passion. There are plenty of people out there who are doing everything with their passion, but it's just not clicking with them. Mm-hmm. And they're afraid of changing, because we're always told, we're programmed and we're indoctrinated from the time we're in high school. You know, when you're 17, 18 years old, they sit you down in front of the guidance counselor and says, okay, what do you want to do for the next 70 years of your life? Uh-huh. And you go to college and you get a degree and you figure, oh my God, I've spent $40,000, $70,000, $100,000 on this degree. I have got to stay in this profession even if I hate it because I've just invested all this money. And the one thing I want to make clear to everybody who's walking that path or people who have a passion but haven't found what it's there for is don't be afraid to try on a different set of clothes. Don't be afraid to put on a different costume and to step into a different persona. The goal of living your passion and living your authentic self, and hopefully when you find that, being able to monetize your passion in such a way that you can live a comfortable lifestyle, live your passion, and empower others to do the same is a noble goal. But it's not just one path. I cannot tell you how many different roads I have been on my particular journey with my passion and my desire to empower others, because some of them were just not right. And I never shirked away from saying, okay, let me try something else until I found something that not only made my soul sing, but also made my bank account grow. And I really hate to be that blunt, especially when we're talking about esoteric concepts, but money is a very important factor, and it does go with unconditional love, because so many people in the metaphysical community, in the esoteric community, in the spiritual community have a negative connotation about money. Folks, if you love yourself unconditionally, and when you love yourself unconditionally, you will see money as a tool to bring you more of what you need to help spread your message and for you to live comfortably and take care of your family. And that is a very large part of unconditional love, is being able to take care of yourself. So don't be afraid of the money, and don't be afraid to try different things until you find the right one. I am 51 years old. I have been on this journey since I was 25. I believe I have finally found it. It took me 30 years practically, well, 25, 26. But I think I finally found it. It doesn't matter the time that you take to get the journey. What matters is the journey that you take to get there and that you finally arrive.
And it is the journey, because where you arrive will change again. And that's the beauty of, like, it's constantly expanding and valid as a point for those that are jumping onto their passion and unfolding and making choices very consciously. I will also say that for those that have perhaps lived a passionate life in, say, business or some format where they've made more than substantial amounts of money and have brought themselves all their creature comforts and still feel perhaps lost and feeling empty, this is where the unconditional love piece really steps in, because the financial gain and the materialism will not bring us what we already have within. When we tap into what we already have within, everything gets amplified with it. So if you do happen to have the outer successes and the materialism and the money flow and the money streams, and you're finding that you're still not happy or still not feeling fulfilled, the answer isn't in more of anything. The answer is inside you, and to come back into that sense of self-love. And then in that love will take the materialism, the money flow, and it will rearrange our relationship with money in such a way that the money we do have and the money we create is going to be a part of the joy of our life, not a fear of will I lose it or a fear of will I ever get it.
It is true that people living in a scarcity paradigm, that in order to get over that, you do need to see yourself as a I'm going to use the word a divine creature. You could put whatever word you want in there. I'm going to use divine, the greatest version of the grandest vision you ever had for yourself, in loving yourself. And when you do that, you will automatically switch from the scarcity paradigm to the abundance paradigm, which means you won't worry about the money. You'll just know that it's there. You'll know that you'll be able to make it. You'll know that the client will come at the right time. You'll know that the teacher will come at the right time.
And to that point, and I do like bringing this part of it up because it is often overlooked. Hoarding of massive amounts of wealth is scarcity principle. In other words, if you're afraid of losing it, then you really have no abundance. And we know that, some people that have nothing are extraordinarily abundant. And this is where it comes down to the level of the heart. And in a way, individuals like you and I who have embarked on this pathway, and many who are listening are doing this themselves, making impact, and we're relearning our true place in this reality versus the one that we have been taught to believe, that everything is
Mm-hmm.
limited, everything is scarce, everything is, we have to hoard, we have to protect, it is so far from the truth. The whole idea, the fundamental paradigm shift is to realize and reconnect with the fact that we are the creator principle within us. How we think, how we feel is what we create. And these are the very beginning steps of what I started to encounter when I started doing this, which was so completely missing from my life. I was told how to live, but I wasn't shown how to live. And I was shown how to live externally to other people's standards, but I wasn't actually shown how to cultivate my own personal reality. And it
Mm-hmm.
is a journey, and it is one that, from 1990 to 2000, I mean, it took those years of the books and the TV and everything to wake up one day and decide that I wanted to start a nonprofit called the Love Foundation. The Love Foundation didn't start until 10 years after I had done these other things. And even when we started the Love Foundation, I knew intrinsically that this, based on my business acumen, my background, that what I saw as disparity, even in the nonprofit world, I said, when we start this, we're going to do this differently. In other words, it's going to fit in the structure of society, and it's going to be simultaneously a big, beautiful, organic experiment of how to bring all these same understandings into an organization. And even from there, it took almost to the end of the fourth year before we actually had our first substantial program, Global Love Day, which we launched in 2004. But we're literally inspiring people, which makes us stand out even more unusual as an organization. And yet, every step that's been done has been done by opening up and opening up and opening up and saying this too is possible. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. This too is possible, and that coming from that core understanding that I love myself enough, and in fact, to the point where I love myself enough to recognize I am part of humanity, I am humanity, therefore I also love humanity. So,
I also think that's another aspect of unconditional love, of universal love, is realizing that we are all one, that we are all the same. We are all made of the same energy, whether you're white, black, brown, yellow, purple, red, whether you're gay, straight, bi, poly, whatever it is, we are all one. And when you start, at least for me, I know this happened for me, is once I started to accept myself, warts and all, unconditionally, and step into my power because I am loving myself unconditionally, then all of a sudden I stopped being uber judgmental. I
mhm.
stopped judging others or putting my definitions of what success was or what love was or what practicality was on other people, and I just let them be. I saw them for who they are, which were loving beings. Now, I know we've talked an awful lot about love in very esoteric concepts here, and I want to let people know straight off the bat that I still struggle with this. There are times when I will curse a blue streak when I get cut off in traffic. There are times when I will meet people and I just want to wring their necks and say, "No, you're wrong. You're on the wrong side of history. You're on the wrong side of society. You are wrong." And so it's not a situation where you get universal love and everything becomes fine and sunshine and butterflies and this Snow White kind of Disney movie happens. So while Harold and I are speaking about this and we're talking about all these wonderful changes, understand that there's a practical side of this where you're going to have challenges. You're going to beat yourself up. The important thing to remember at that point is don't beat yourself up for very long. It's not a situation where you sit there and you go, I am love. And all of a sudden, everything becomes wine and roses. The challenges are still going to be there. But when you focus on being love and loving yourself and loving the other people, those challenges become more manageable.
Absolutely. In fact, when I started this understanding for myself, and I said, wait a minute, I was, again, vaguely taught, we're all humans seeking a spiritual experience, and that never made sense to me. And then when I realized, wait a minute, we're actually spiritual beings first and foremost, having a human experience. We are
Yep.
consciousness in a body. So now the pursuit of becoming spiritual, like I have to do everything right in moralistic terms based on other people's idea of what morals are right, that somehow I can gain the favor to be spiritual someday, and that it was fundamentally inside out and backwards. So by understanding that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, then I can actually start to look at myself. Well, I am love, and of course, as a human who's never encountered this before, I had to actually start by saying, wait a minute. In this moment, if I were to go out and say, well, I'll be good enough a week from next Tuesday, if I can do enough changes in my personality over the next 8.5 days, then I can say, well, come back to me next Tuesday and I'll love myself. And trust me, I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals with this very question: do you love yourself unconditionally? And almost always the first response has been no. And then the second response is, can you get back with me? I'm getting there. I'm working on it. Someday I will. And what I came to understand by claiming it, by accepting it, by bringing it in to this reality in this moment and saying, I love myself right here and right now, as you said, warts and all, mistakes and all, past, present, future, whatever it is, whatever I deem to be this way, that way, or the other way, if I just simply embrace all of me, that means in this moment, I have actually claimed and made a choice to love myself unconditionally, and it can never be taken away because I've now actually loved myself once, which means no matter what happens in my experiences, I can always come back to the foundation that, hey, I do love myself, which is extraordinarily different. And I think, Gary, you would agree with me. It's difficult to put to words the experiential reordering of our reality. When we
Oh, yeah.
do get to this, it's in other words, another phrase that I've used over the years, people can prove me right or prove me wrong depending on their personal experience. So I can't prove this to you. I can only say that this is what has happened for me. And by doing this, by bringing love and recognizing love, that I am loved, lovable, loving, that I am unconditional love right here and right now, that does mean then, yes, just like you said, when we go out there, certainly for the first few years, it was like, oh, I chopped away the big boulders, but then it was like lots of little rocks that would come in my path that were not so loving. And then it became pebbles,
Hmm.
and every time we step out into the highway, every time we step into a store, every time we step in humanity, we are constantly given an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, what's my response going to be? And we are not, and I too, it isn't always the first response being totally unconditional loving. I mean, thankfully, many years later, the majority of them are compared to the initial years. But it's like, because I have unconditional love as my life understanding, that becomes the way I look at life. And when I look at life like that, the self-correction is almost these days instantaneous. It literally changes the dialogue, the vocabulary, the physical structures we live in, our bodies. It changes our relationships, our interactions. Friends that were fearful when we were fearful, they go away. And clearly, by my experience, I mean, I am surrounded by worldwide by loving people of every walk, faith, shape, size, perspective possible, and yet they have all found me, us, because they too, in their own journey, tens of thousands of miles away at times, literally are understanding this universal love.
I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about the internal dialogue and the self talk, because it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Because the self dialogue that we use, the self talk that we tell ourselves, is so vitally important that if we are sitting there talking to ourselves and we're sitting there and why is this guy in the bus eating this pastrami sandwich while I'm trying to get to work? Or how stupid could I be to forget my car keys? Oh my Lord, I can't believe I'm going to be late for this meeting. If we just stop when we have those negative self-talks and we switch it and we're conscious and we use a kinder and a gentler language when thinking about other people, and especially when thinking about ourselves, that will go a long way for setting us up and leading us down that path to that unconditional love. And I also think what is going on while people are afraid of spirituality or don't believe they could achieve it, it's not only the self-dialogue that they're using, but it's the unrealistic expectations that we have painted on our head. You used the word spiritual while you were describing your process. And when people think of spiritual beings, they don't think of the trash guy who comes every Tuesday. They don't think of the bus driver or the subway guy or even the girl in the cubicle next to them. When you say spiritual, you're going to be thinking of the Maharishi. You're going to be thinking of the Dalai Lama. You may be thinking of the Pope. You may be thinking of a rabbi. But you're not going to be thinking in everyday terms. And I believe we need to change that and really have people understand that you can be spiritual, that you are spiritual, and you are perfect in your life. You don't have to attain anything. The knowledge that we're talking about and the books that we touched upon in this episode, you don't have to read. If you don't want to read them, don't read them, okay? Just by being yourself, your perfect self, and accepting that, whether you want to go bowling on a Saturday night or you want to learn Kabbalah, it still is an individuation of divinity. So I think if we can change the definition of what spiritual is from this highfalutin one that we have where you have to scale Everest and you get 3 questions to ask to the Dalai Lama, so you better damn well ask the right ones, to something that's day in, day out and very practical. So would you have any practical advice, things that people can do on a day in, day out basis that they could bring more divinity, more spirituality into their life and understand this concept of unconditional love?
Well, you touched on the thoughts and feelings, and that was probably my first genuinely profound revelation insight. Something that I had never ever understood or had ever been shown, even mentioned. I mean, power of positive thinking was talked about, but it was never about the fact that my thoughts and my feelings create my reality. And when I became instantly aware of the fact that if I can pay attention to my thoughts and my feelings, I have a choice. The very fundamental fulcrum point is we each have a choice.
We really got some great truth nuggets out of Harold in that conversation. The biggest one is that you don't have to jump off the metaphysical cliff. You don't have to make those drastic changes to your life. You can take small, incremental baby steps on the journey to spiritual awareness, on the journey to unconditional love. If you are that kind of person who loves to put themselves out there and you want to jump off the cliff, make sure you got that parachute and jump. Because when you put yourself out there, that's when you're going to see great, great changes and great, great opportunities. Life begins at the end of our comfort zone. Great things happen. Magic happens when we push ourselves beyond our comfort zone and we take that leap of faith. So if you are a risk taker, don't be afraid to jump off that metaphysical cliff. But please understand that you don't have to. You can take small, incremental steps on this journey. The other truth nugget Harold hit us with was that you don't have to follow the same path. And in fact, your path will change on this journey. So don't be afraid to try different things. Don't think that you have to stay on one path simply because you spent all this money and all this time. If it doesn't speak to your soul, don't be afraid to put on a different costume and to play a different role. Keep trying to find where your passion fits. And remember the importance of self-dialogue and the importance that thoughts and feelings play in unconditional love. Thoughts and feelings are the key to everything. The emotions behind the thoughts is what makes the law of attraction go. It's what makes the universe go. And it is what makes magic happen. So, those were great truth nuggets that Harold laid on us. He's going to give us more in part 3 of my conversation, which is coming up on Friday. I hope you listen to it, and I hope you're enjoying this Love Week special event that we're doing here at Passionate Talk. But until then, follow your dreams and passions and manifest the life that you choose.